Well, welcome to Bitcoin Sydney. Yeah, one of the biggest turnouts we've had ever, I think. Must have a special guest here tonight, I suppose. So, yeah, so... welcome, Hans. Yeah. Hands up, new members. Fantastic. Welcome along. If you join our chat group, if you haven't already done that, you can see the URL for it here. We run Bitcoin meetups here every month. We try to cover a different theme every time. So you've seen tonight's topic, price pressures on Bitcoin, which we'll be able to cover from a number of perspectives tonight. We've also done a number of meetups, and we'll do more of them on the Lightning Network. Some important and exciting innovations happening there for the real future of money, not the alternative attempts to do that. So please come along again in the future. Of course, tonight we have a very special lineup. Most of you will have, obviously you're aware of Tone Vays and the work that he's done. Who? Yeah. Over the work he's been doing with Bitcoin for the last few years. Now, Tone obviously has a background in trading, which I know many of you are keen to hear about. But what I also particularly like about Tone is the fact that he's always been a very strong advocate for Bitcoin. So he's really gone out there and not simply promoted himself or his trading, but actually really gone out and fought the good fight for Bitcoin against every shitcoin or every blockchain or every altcoin, Bcash, although I repeat myself, but you take my point. And so this has been really, really good. I mean, you know, we're talking media appearances, debates all over the place. So we're really pleased to have him with us tonight and to hear his insights. On the panel as well, we have our usual special people that we've got in our group today. Podcaster Stephan Livera. Many of you will have heard his podcast all over the world. We're all in the room with that. So obviously he gets the best people on across the world in Bitcoin on that. And of course our friar, McCook, who's done some excellent work on mining in Bitcoin and the interesting the spiritual guidance and the humorous religious parallels with what we're going. They call us a cult, so we'll just say, well, okay, well, we'll embrace that. We can joke at it. So, yeah, if you want a cult, look, if you want, all right. So, now, one other thing, we've got, I'll kick the panel off with a few questions, but then we'll be taking, most of the content can come from you guys. So, questions, anyone who's got a good question tonight, we'll get a microphone out to you, and I've got drink vouchers to give out for great questions. So, and that's courtesy of Independent Reserve tonight, who've generously supported the meetup tonight. We hope that they'll be able to give us some support going forward. They've been, traditionally Independent Reserve have been great supporters of the community going back a long way back until like at least, well, when they started off, I think 2014 we had a Bitcoin Sydney Christmas party, and they were around even then. So we hope to go ahead with those guys. We've got a lot of confidence, particularly in some of the newer products that they're offering. So I might actually ask Nick just to come up and say a few words about what they offer, and then we'll get going with the panel.
Hello everyone, I'm not going to take up any of your time. I know you're here for Tone. I just want to say I'm Independent Reserve. We'll probably be hearing a little bit about trading and buying and selling Bitcoin. If you guys don't have an account and you're interested, please come and see me. I've got $10 free Bitcoin when you sign up. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions, and that's all I'm going to say.
Fantastic. All right, well, I think we'll get this underway then, guys. If you want to come up and take a seat on the panel here. And doing a tweet here for one of the great things about Tony is great roots, so any publicity is very helpful from Tony. No worries.
Another panel on that.
Is the Twitter handle Independent Reserve?
In-depth reserve.
In-depth, okay.
Is the Twitter handle for them.
Amazing. All right, well, we'll get that while Tone's sorting that out. Like I said, we'll be talking about price pressures on Bitcoin tonight, so we have a few different perspectives to go on. Obviously, our special guest Tone will obviously have more of a technical analysis perspective, I've imagined. We've got our in-house Austrian economist, Stephan Livera. And Stephan is also interviewed and very well versed on the stock-to-flow aspects. That's another aspect of it. The Austrian economic perspective on the price of Bitcoin, and of course has the mining aspect of it. So, but maybe I thought we might kick the panel off with we could say it's a controversial topic. I think because we could say that there's been a bit of chatter in the various groups where we've had this group organised telling us about, you shouldn't trade and you shouldn't. And why have you got someone who's into trading up there when you should be holding and all of this? And I said, there's a number of different ways of doing that. We should make that part of the night. Let's discuss the different perspectives on that. So we've got someone who is, so maybe start with Tone, if you could give us a brief overview of what your what your best argument is for technical analysis, the technical analysis influence on the price of Bitcoin.
Sure. It's actually made a really good point. Like, a lot of the people like myself that teach trading, I know there's other people here in the audience that teach trading, and it's somewhat looked down upon as if you're promoting gambling. Well, that's borderline true, but at the same time, if you are going to do it anyway, you might as well learn how to do it right. I don't necessarily equate trading to gambling. I don't know if there is much productivity out of gambling. Like, I haven't thought about it maybe deeply enough. But if people are going to gamble, like, I don't see much fundamental there. But trading does involve profitable companies most of the time. At least that's how it started, and commodities. Like, how do you know what the price of gold should be? How do you know what the price of oil should be if it wasn't for the futures markets, if it wasn't for traders? So there is an actual economic benefit to liquid markets and trading, but it mostly applies to legitimate products and legitimate companies, which is what I tend to promote. I don't promote penny stock trading. I don't promote trading in things that don't matter. This is also why I don't advocate in trading of altcoins. If you're going to trade anything in the crypto space, at least trade Bitcoin. Because trading Bitcoin is necessary. That's what creates the free market price point for Bitcoin. The more Bitcoin that's actually traded, the more liquid the market, the more accurate the price of Bitcoin is. It reflects the economy. People always complain how Bitcoin price is manipulated because someone with $10 million can move the price. But yeah, so if more people traded it, if a bigger percentage of Bitcoin that exists were there in the open market being traded, the price of Bitcoin would be a lot more stable. So while I can see some points of people being critical of those that teach about trading, it's a necessary function, and if you're going to do it, you have to learn how to do it right. Recently, I'm not a big fan of analogies, but the analogy that I made was driving a car. I mean, driving a race car, I don't really see a huge economic benefit to drag racing or racing in general, but driving a car is something necessary and everyone does. And if you go and sit behind the wheel of a car, start driving without any education and any experience, there's a very high probability you're going to die and kill someone else. Trading is not exactly the same because you're not going to die, but you can kill your financial future. So if you're going to be a trader without any kind of education, it's kind of like driving a car without any education on how to drive a car. And people that do trading and lose a lot of money and then say how terrible it is, that never actually learn how to do it right, that's what's going to happen. Just like driving a car without a license or without any trading. At the same time, for most people, buy and hold is a good strategy. If you're really busy, buy and hold is a good strategy. Dollar cost average is a good strategy. For me, myself, I'm a hodler. My travel schedule, my Bitcoin evangelism, it doesn't allow me to pay attention to trades. So I haven't been trading in the last couple of years. I'm looking to step back from traveling. I'm looking to take a step back from Bitcoin evangelism next year because I kind of miss trading and I want to get back to that. But I know better than to trade and have a ridiculous travel schedule where I'm on a plane every 4 days. It's got to be one or the other. If you're going to trade, it has to get a lot of your attention. Otherwise, dollar cost average or HODL.
Would you recommend trading to most people, or would you think that it's something that maybe only people that you feel would be very good at it should attempt?
I try to tell people that trading is not a great idea. I don't recommend trading. What happened with me was I wasn't a very early Bitcoin adopter, so I don't have a giant, millions of dollars, set aside to finance what I do. So in order to finance, Bitcoin evangelism doesn't pay. Contrary to popular belief, YouTube and podcasting doesn't really pay. I'm sure Stephan can attest to that. You don't really make much money in that stuff. So I can only spend so much of my savings doing what I do to fight people like Roger Ver and Bitcoin SV and many of the others that have unlimited funding, so to say. But I give them a run for their money, but that has to be financed a little bit by something. And I've been financing it by teaching what I know, which is trading. Only for those that want to be traders.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think a lot of people think that everything has to be an all or nothing proposition. There was someone that tweeted on the announcement for this event saying, all trading is snake oil. Well, yeah, but there could be a degree of belief in it, can't there? I mean, maybe, is it fair to say that perhaps some of the more esoteric indicators may be snake oil, but there are certain certain more basic indicators, because everybody's looking at the same chart and everybody's following those rules, then they can work in a self-fulfilling way.
There is a lot of snake oil in the trading space. I go out of my way to teach people how to make their own decisions. That's the best I can do. There is, that's the least scammy, the least snake oil way to, I guess, charge people for anything related to trading, is to try and teach them to make their own decisions. On the other end of the spectrum is follow everything I say. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. And there's so much gray area in between there that it's almost impossible to say like where the snake oil is. Now, even if you are gonna follow what a person says, follow everything I say, if they're making you money, then I guess that's okay. It's not the end of the world, but I don't want to do that. Like, everything I do tries to stay as far away as possible, follow what I do. I want to teach you the basics, and then you take it in your own direction. There's so many Bitcoin, there's so many trading indicators, there's so many trading strategies. They're infinite. They're literally infinite.
This is what I find, that you can look at when I look at the different predictions different people make. Well, you can find, it seems to me, an indicator that indicates two completely opposite things. One indicator will tell me it'll go up, and another indicator that will say it'll go down. It's
and both of those people can lose money, and both of those people can make money. 90% of what will allow you to stay as a profitable trader is your money management. Your understanding of risk, sticking to your stop losses. That's the goal long term. Anyone can get lucky or unlucky on any given trade. Most people will tell you some of the most profitable trades they've made in their life was pure luck. Like the trades that thought were crazy but made them the most money. And some of the trades that they thought were no-brainers were the ones that lost them the most amount of money. As long as your money management is sound, you'll be fine. But you have to learn. You have to start somewhere.
What I might do is ask for Hass and your perspective on, and perhaps contrast that with the other approaches Tone mentioned, the dollar cost averaging aspect of entering Bitcoin.
Yeah, so trading may be for some, but I think just broad human psychology, there's probably only like 0.1% of the human population that has the fortitude and sense of risk that can trade. So for me, I buy extremely regularly. So I have a dollar cost average set up with independent reserve. I buy every day, exact same amount of fiat every single day. That's automatic.
Every day?
Every day. In America, there's a company called Spark Swap now, and that allows hourly DCA. If we had that in Australia, I would be stacking every hour.
I know you worked hard enough with independent reserve to persuade them to put on the dollar cost average.
Exactly.
So well done for that.
I was noisy for years. So yeah, I do that in my sleep, and then once every couple of weeks, I log into my trading account and say, oh nice, I've got this many Bitcoins. Take them, put them in my multi-sig and pretend I have no more Bitcoins. And I say, shit, I need to go buy some Bitcoins.
When did you start doing this kind of stuff?
So really started like going hard, probably mid-2018, because my bank had me by my balls, because I had to refinance a mortgage. So if the bank goes through all of your bank statements, all that kind of stuff, and if they see a DCA, especially me, money leaving the same amount every single day, I'll probably get declined a mortgage. But once that went through, so probably March 2018, a very good time to start, because Bitcoin was down in the gutter, around 3,500, 4 grand US, and we'll soon show what happened. If you've been DCAing every single week from the 12th of December 2017, when Bitcoin was at its all-time high, you'd be up 30% now, even though Bitcoin's down 65%. So I would really challenge a trader to beat me in terms of that.
No, that's a very good point.
And that's buying from the top. So if you started at the gutter, like 1st of the 1st 2018, you're up like 200%.
Yeah, also,
it's just buying every week, not even thinking about it. Because the thing is, if it's not automated, this is where the human psychology kicks in as well for trading. All right, price gone up today. Oh, it'll probably come back down a bit tomorrow. I'll wait till tomorrow to buy. Next day, price is higher. We'll probably pull back. I'll wait till tomorrow. Next day, so on. Also happens on the way down. Oh, dropped today. It'll probably drop a little more tomorrow. I'll buy tomorrow. And it's a situation of the day that never comes. In Bitcoin, so if you just stick to it, don't even think about it. That's the way I like to go about it. I've got the balls to be all in Bitcoin, but not the balls to be a trader.
No, and that's great. I just want to mention. I have a friend. He has like a public articles on Medium. Name is Ugly Old Goat, and even before the $20,000 top, he wrote this article, his first article, dollar cost average, and he purposely chose the 2013 market top as the dollar cost average day. I'll pick the worst day in the first 8 years of Bitcoin's life, and dollar cost average $500 a month, and see where that lands you, and that portfolio is just insane.
And it's the easiest thing in the world, like you don't even have to think, you just set up a recurring transfer in your net bank, and then...
Where do we do that, mate?
What was that?
What app do we do that through?
You can just do that through your net bank, so you set up a recurring transfer to independent reserve through whatever bank it is. I've got a CBA, unluckily doesn't allow a daily recurring transfer, so I have to set up 5 of those. But once you've set that up, as soon as the money hits your independent reserve account, it buys Bitcoin.
Did you want to add to that, Stephan?
Oh, it's Amber.
Let me throw my.
It's independent reserve.
There's different services out there.
Independent reserve.
So there's a few different. So there's a few points I just wanted to add to that. So I think Tone makes a good point. There is an economic and social function of speculation, right? So even if you're a farmer and whatever, you need somebody to take that on the side of that trade, right? So I think nobody's really disputing that. I think really the question is more about how many people can profitably trade, right? And the way I'm thinking of it is more like, it's kind of like poker, right? Like, you got the house, right? and you've got all the poker players, and it's probably only that the top few percent are really actually making money. Like, and then the next few are maybe like break-even-ish, and then pretty much everyone below that is just losing money. And I think of it like it's like how most guys think they're an above-average driver, and it's like, well, sorry, mate, not everyone can be an above-average driver, right? So it's like a poker game, and you have to, you know, if you're going to win, you need to be one of the best. And so I'm big on dollar cost averaging as well. I'm a huge fan of the auto DCA feature that Independent Reserve put out, and Amber as well, who've recently who've been driving that as well. I'm a big believer in more. I think we're seeing a mindset shift as well, right? So from the 2013 days, it was seen a bit more like a lump sum thing. It was more like, oh, only invest what you're willing to lose, right? Whereas now, it's more like there's an understanding, and I think Haas has been driving this thing for years, this whole idea of no, like, this is not just like I just want to get rich. There's a social, like, are you down for the cause? Like, do you really want to take the power of money away from the state and from any centralized party? And that message now is sort of coming through, and now more people are sort of taking that idea of, it's not just like buy it once and passively hold or hodl. It's active, it's regularly accumulate, right? Whether you're buying, or whether you are mining Bitcoin, or whether you are running a BTC Pay server and you're a merchant, you're earning Bitcoin, it's more about how can you accumulate, right? So if you're fundamentally bullish, like all of us are, you want to accumulate more because you think this thing is going, you know, millions of dollars per coin eventually. So that's my take on it. I think it's more just about the messaging is shifting around this idea of dollar cost averaging. It's obviously things start small, but there are some well-known providers coming out in the US. There's River Financial. They're coming out with this big idea of, hey, dollar cost average in Europe. There's Get Bitter, the Spark Swap, as Haas mentioned, and here it's starting to become a thing as well. So I think that's the mindset shift that is being driven a little bit.
Just out of curiosity, how many poker players are in the room? Raise your hand. Alright, what about traders? There's more poker players in the room. So you guys know the odds.
Do you play for money?
Oh, okay.
Now, well, I think this is the question I think a lot of people will probably, especially if they're newer to Bitcoin, and we'll just ask it, we'll get down and dirty. Three perspectives here from different backgrounds, where we see the price going, medium term. We're not going to say short term, but perhaps from Tone's point of view, you're looking at the charts, you've got it, all right, we'll go to Haas first. You want to go first? All right, Haas. All right, you'll be taking it from the perspective of the miners, I suppose, with an upcoming reward halving, of course.
You know what? I actually want to take it from a DCA point of view first.
Okay.
All right. So right now we have 1,800 Bitcoin being minted a day. Let's round the price up to 10 grand. That's 18 million bucks worth of Bitcoin to be mined every day. I'll put up a website now which shows you how much of a percentage of the miners are holding their coins or selling them. Right now the miners are selling about 39% of the coins they mine. It's easy to analyze because the very first ever transaction of a new block can be easily measured, and the first spends are tracked. But that's an aside. So 18 million a day. 5 billion adults in the world. Let's say we get 1% DCA in $1 a day. That's 50 million a day. All of a sudden we have a Bitcoin that's worth triple. In 5 months, double that again because of the halving. So as more and more people just slowly start saving their money.
18 million or 1.8 million?
1,800 coins.
1,800, 10 grand.
1.8 million.
1,800 times 1,000 is 1.8.
What am I missing?
Sorry, 18.
Yeah, he's right. He's right.
There's 18 million.
Yeah. Anyway, even if it was 1.8.
Tequila's good. Tequila's good.
But yeah, 18 million a day. It doesn't take many people to start, and I'm talking $1 a day.
100 Bitcoin at $10,000 a Bitcoin.
1,800 a day.
Right, no, but I'm just saying, if you have 100 Bitcoin at $10,000 one Bitcoin, that's $1 million.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's 1,800 Bitcoins mined a day.
Right.
The market to absorb that. Let's just round the price up to 10 grand.
Is 18 million. Thanks, iPhone.
It's all right. We'll edit this out in post.
I think the point's still good.
It's been a while,
So all it takes is more people to just start treating this. So like Stephan said, if you're here for the cause, if you're here to like, effectively this is, because I'm a friar and I bang on about religion and whatnot, this isn't a war, this is a crusade. So this is ideology versus ideology. This is clean, hard, scarce, pure money versus evil money printed fiat that enables war, poverty, everything. So this is like, it's not a joke. For me, Bitcoin's a matter of life and death. So if you want the price to be stable, you got to put your nuts on the table, and that requires, frequent investment.
So, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so I think of it like, there's a few things. So absolutely, that's like we should think of that as the base case. Now, in practice, when we've seen historically, so if you look at guys like Adamant Capital, Tour de Mister, and some of those guys, they've done some work in terms of like on-chain analytics, right? And so what they're some of the stuff they've done is look at this thing like a measure of liveliness, which is, think of that like a measure of what are the OG hodlers doing? Because what House is speaking about is the new supply, and we're all buying up that new supply. But the other question is, what are the whales and the guys who have been holding for years? Because once that new supply comes to the market, then it's more than 18 million in practice, right? And so one insight that I think is valuable to share is that historically, as the price has kind of come back to an all-time high, those OG hodlers have tended to want to cash some out, right? Because it was a phenomenon, it was like a psychological thing. It was like I want to lock in my gains, right? So for example, you might have bought at, say $800, and then the price crashed down to $200, and then you were waiting for years, right? It was years until you got back above the line, right, in terms of being in profit. And so typically what we saw was, as we started to reach the all-time high from the past, around 1,000 to 1,200 or whatever it was, right? You started to see some of those OG hodlers start selling, and that was one phenomenon that you might think of as an effect. It's like a psychological thing that, assuming the base case, right, is that if we, come back to 20,000 again, we'll start seeing that again. We'll start seeing some people saying, hey, I wish I sold that at 20,000, back in December 2017. So now I might sell some now because I want to just lock some gains in. I want to feel like I'm a winner out of this and not that I'm a loser, right? So I want to lock in some gains. So I think that's one point to consider.
Do you think as well, perhaps, that as we approach the halving, and it has been about almost 2.5 years since the bubble top, that those sorts of weak hands and people that were going to start cashing out their Bitcoin have probably already done it by now, and therefore that's also going to add to the problem of a drop in supply? Right.
Well, I think of it more like they feel like it's a psychological thing. They feel like, hey, this thing was 20,000 at one point, so I don't want to sell for less than 20,000. I want to sell for some for that. Like it's like a locking in psychological thing. So I mean that's kind of my take. I think this year will be kind of like a gradual build up year. Again, I'm not a trading guy, but I think next year is like really going to be the crazy one. So that's my take.
All right, Tone.
So I'm the trader guy. So as a trader and experienced trader, and you're right, some people are waiting for the price of Bitcoin to come back to 20,000 so they can like sell at the all-time high, which is probably the worst thing they could possibly do as a trader. Like the time where I become most bullish about Bitcoin is when Bitcoin gets to that $17,500 to $18,000 range, because that's when the hype starts again, that it's about to break new all-time high, and that's when it just explodes. And that's what happened last time. So many people were scared when Bitcoin went back to $1,000 after 4 years. Bitcoin was at $1,000 at the end of 2013. It wasn't at $1,000 again until 2017, so 3.5 years it took. And when it did that, so many people cashed out, including some of my friends, and I told them this is the time to get in. And they were laughing. And then Bitcoin goes from 1,000 to 20,000 in less than 1 year. So the time to actually get in properly is as close to 20,000 as possible. Or immediately after 20,000 is still fine. I think it's going to be a challenge to get to that 20,000. I actually thought it was a little bit less per day than 18 million. 18 million per day is a lot to absorb.
5 million.
It's a lot to absorb. And considering how Bitcoin's been 50% down for 2 years now, it's becoming less and less hype. It's becoming less and less interesting. Less people are Googling Bitcoin. I've seen so many people leave this space in the last 12 months, more so than new people have come in. I mean, I remember doing meetups like 3 years ago, 400 people in a room. Like it's, like you were saying, like it's starting to grow, but starting to grow slowly. Pretty sure.
When you say that was in New York, was it? You were having those
that was
400 person
Switzerland
meetups?
actually.
Oh, okay.
Australia too, man.
Yeah, it's. I mean, some of you that were here in mid 2017 that did meetups. I'm pretty sure you had a bigger
It
crowd.
was just towards in the top of the bubble. There was a lot of people coming on.
Well, before the top. Let's be
leading
realistic.
up to that, like
Yeah.
from about
Right, like around
September
August
until
when it
about
was like
November.
5 to 7,000. I'm sure this room would be a lot fuller. And just think about it, right?
Anymore. I had to cut the numbers.
Right. And right now, Bitcoin is at a price above that. During the summer, Bitcoin was 3,000 to 5,000. Now Bitcoin is 8. It's 2 years later, so you figure more people would be aware, but the room is a third of the size. And the longer Bitcoin stays in this area below 10,000, the harder it's going to be to get back up. That's why it takes a lot longer to get back up to the all-time high. But when it does, the hype takes over. Not to mention that in early 2017, there was a lot less, well, first of all, fake Bitcoins didn't exist. There was no Bcash, there was no BSV, there was no Bitcoin Gold or Diamond or Private or wherever the hell just pumped recently. Like, it was a lot easier to identify Bitcoin versus garbage. And now it's a lot harder. So there was lots of headwinds at Bitcoin. This is fundamentally where I think Bitcoin is struggling a lot. And just this dilution of, who saw the Kim.com tweets recently, you know, I was in a bunch of those. And it looks like Kim, I was at Kim.com's house for 3 days trying to, you know, explain to him that him going with the Bcash solution is insane. But it looks like I probably failed. And Kim.com tweets out about, you know, Bcash. Yeah, a lot of the Bitcoiners are trying to bring sanity to the equation, but read through those replies. You should try IOTA. You should try this. You should try that. Well, what? It's crazy. Like people think that Bitcoin will work better on top of XRP. I mean, this is how insane it's getting.
That's an excellent segue into the last question I wanted to have before opening it up to the floor, because I didn't want to let this opportunity pass by while we've got 3 of the most outspoken Bitcoin maximalists we're likely to have on a panel in the near future.
I'll still mention the price though.
Oh, sure, go ahead. But let's see the best argument for why Bitcoin and only Bitcoin, and why we shouldn't be bothering with any of those other distractions.
All right, so I'll briefly mention the price. Because of a lot of the struggle, and not to mention, I do believe in technical analysis, which, you know, technical analysis just helps you get in and out and set stop losses. It doesn't mean it's going to predict the market. I think Bitcoin is going to struggle. I think the majority of this year is going to be spent below $10,000, even through the halving. I still think that there is a higher probability than not to go below 6.5 at some point. Hopefully before the halving, because after the halving it becomes kind of really shitty for the miners. So hopefully before the halving. But as far as why it's going to be Bitcoin, the big misconception is Tone and Bitcoin maximalists are invested in Bitcoin and they want everything else to die, which isn't true. In fact, it's the opposite of that. The reason why I'm invested in Bitcoin and only Bitcoin is because I believe the free market will eventually select the right solution. And unlike, the Australian dollar is not that bad, even though you guys are still down 30% against the dollar. But if we're talking about, you know, even, there's really not many countries in your region, but let's go with, say, Philippines or India, like on this side of the world. Like, the only reason why those currencies exist and devalue 10+% per year, Vietnam, for example, is because the government forces you to use it. If there was a free market and the government didn't force you to use your local currency, who on earth would use, Vietnamese currency or Indian currency? They wouldn't. And people seem to misunderstand that the reason why we have 150 currencies around the world is because it's not a free market of currency. It's because the local government forces you to use it. But who forces you to use Ethereum? Who forces you to use Litecoin? Who forces you to use Monero? And the answer is nobody. So at the end of the day, or at the end of the decade, I can actually say at the end of the decade because now we've got a whole 10-year runway. By the end of the decade, the free market will expose the nonsense currencies in the crypto space and no one's going to want to use them. It's going to be Bitcoin. For all this nonsense of, why are you spending Bitcoin? It's so slow, it's so expensive. 80 to 90% of all crypto transactions are still Bitcoin. No matter how expensive they are, no matter how slow they are, no matter how non-private they are, there's still 80% Bitcoin. It's like, well, why would you want to spend Bitcoin? Don't you want to spend the crappy old coins like Litecoin? Yeah, but no one has it. No one spends it because it's not worth anything and no one uses it. There are so many other reasons. Anyone here read the Bitcoin Standard, Stephan's book? Excellent. My biggest takeaway from the book, it's just one paragraph. I'm like, oh my God, I finally get it. Why is silver worthless? Like real silver, not Litecoin silver, but real silver. I'm like, oh my God, I finally get it. In the early 1900s, when we had modern banking and gold started to be backed by the paper dollars, gold all of a sudden is scalable. You can now go and buy your cup of coffee with gold because prior to gold backing paper divisible currency, 1 gram of gold would buy you too much. But the moment gold became scalable to microtransactions, silver started to lose all monetary value. Well, why do you need silver? You can buy anything you want with gold now. I mean, the government kind of ruined the tie to gold, but that's different. So unless Lightning fails, and it doesn't look like it is, it's just scaling incredibly well, who needs another blockchain if your Bitcoin is faster and cheaper than everything else? As far as privacy goes, Bitcoin is going to get the privacy. As far as Ethereum and EOS and Tezos goes, well, now we have the liquid sidechain on top of Bitcoin using liquid Bitcoin pegged to Bitcoin. Why do you want a more volatile currency like Ethereum that uses Reddit to decide its future monetary policy? And they still don't know what the future monetary policy is, and they still don't know how they're going to implement it because the last hard fork forgot to raise their debt ceiling. Sorry, difficulty bomb. It's just complete insanity, right? The free market is going to eradicate all of them. If you want to trade them, if you're a trader and you want to trade this nonsense to make more Bitcoin, that's fine. Go for it. Even I don't want to do that. I'd rather trade traditional markets. The free market will make Bitcoin be the only one. It's just that simple. I'm sure we would have many competing internets today if creating a competing internet came with creating your own money. I think the reason why we only had one internet from the start and people recognized it was because creating a new internet would cost you a lot of money and not, get rich and walk away. Unfortunately, in the crypto space, everyone just wants to print their own money.
Amazing. All right, Stephan, let's have your most toxic version.
Excellent. So yeah, look, I totally Tone made a lot of fantastic points. I think it ultimately just comes down to how big is the monetary network effect. Too many people are like, oh, my technology this, my technology that. They're not actually decentralized. They don't have a credible commitment to 21 million. Right? There are many Bitcoiners out there who will die on this hill. They will never allow more than 21 million. Right? That's etched. It's just not changing. It's not happening. We're anti-inflation. That's what this whole thing was about. And so you look over the longer term, Bitcoin is the only one that can credibly make that statement that that it's limited to 21 million and there won't be any more of it. And so fundamentally, when you're trading with somebody else, right, I want to buy milk or whatever, they want Bitcoin. They don't want the shitcoins. So that is just fundamentally just a very hard network effect to outcompete. So that is why the shitcoins won't beat Bitcoin. And it just comes back to this whole stock to flow argument, or another way to frame it is just inflation rate. what is the inflation rate of Australian dollar or US dollar or gold, 1.5% or whatever. And for anyone who's really thinking for the long term, you just have to think, well, hey, Bitcoin has the lowest inflation rate. And it's the one that actually is credibly lowest inflation rate. And so we're going to hit that point. After this halving, we're going to go to something like 2% and a bit inflation per year, and it's going to very rapidly drop. So we'll have like one of the lowest inflation rates possible. Will be lower than gold, I think, after, like, not this halving, but the next halving, and it may even happen in between, actually, because so much of the supply of Bitcoin has already been created, and people just don't grasp the numbers here, and I think Haas is trying to do that as well when he's trying to point out, hey, look, the new amount is 18 million per day. Well, you know, over time, it's just going to get so difficult to beat that. And the other factor is, as well, is people want to build on the thing that's going to last. If you look at, you know, one of these shitcoin market cap websites and whatever, and if you use Wayback Machine and you look at it 5 years ago, how many of those shitcoins are even relevant today? Very few of them, because they've all moved. They were just trying to ride the coattails of Bitcoin, and fundamentally, Bitcoin has just stayed king all that time, and it's just so difficult to displace or dislodge that network effect. So that's my take.
So you want a toxic?
Yes.
All right, go. So why Bitcoin and not shitcoin? Well, you can try your best, come closer than close, but you'll never be the original. So that's one reason. But this is how I see the war and the crusade, in an analogy. So Satoshi was flying a big Hercules, and he dropped off some paratroopers on a beachhead all these years ago. Luckily, we went unnoticed by the Axis powers of central banking. We managed to form a beachhead, and we're building from there. Over the years, our offensive and defensive weapons technology has improved, and we're moving forward on the front every day. You know, you've got people at the military academy teaching our soldiers. You know, you get people getting shelled by the central banks losing limbs, so you've got the friar there trying to boost morale in the trenches. And for the people that can't build the weapons or train others or, you know, patch up wounds or whatever, there's still a very basic task that can be accomplished, and that's literally filling up sandbags and shoring up the defenses. So fill up our bags with sats and stack them on the defensive wall. Now the problem is, we're out here in the sandpit trying to fill our bags, and there's a bunch of shitcoiners saying, "Boo, look at this sandcastle I'm making." Get the F out of my freaking sandpit. And that's they're effectively delaying our war effort, and I'd say working for the enemy indirectly. So if you want to really take the power back and, you know, move forward with this war, you got to put the shitcoins on the back burner.
Excellent. That was great. I want to add a little bit. So, to me, Bitcoin has three amazing properties, and they're three a little bit independent. Stephan really hinted on one of them, but for me, it's not the most important one. So to me, Bitcoin has three properties that are independent from each other. You have unconfiscatability, censorship-resistant value transfer, and Bitcoin's economic policy of 21 million Bitcoin that's not going to change. To me, that 21 million Bitcoin that's not going to change, it's nowhere near as important as the other two. Because we have that property in existence, it's pretty much gold. We have that property. We have gold that is very hard to find right now until we start mining asteroids. But right now on Earth, gold has that property. Other metals have that property. But we've never had unconfiscatability. We kind of did before the invention of electricity. Your gold was unconfiscatable if you hid it, because then no one can actually find it. But now with metal detectors, hard to transfer it, hard to even hide it, right? I'm sure they got helicopters, they can just fly around, and if you bury it, they'll spot it. So everything you ever owned has been confiscatable by someone with a bigger gun or the government, but Bitcoin isn't. So those two properties, unconfiscatability and censorship-resistant value transfer, I don't care how much it costs, I don't care how long it takes to get there, I don't care how private it is. The ability for me to send it and no one can stop me, and no one can stop the recipient from getting it, that's new. That's important.
What would be your response to someone who would say that surely if you were incarcerated or coerced or otherwise threatened to hand over your private key, surely you would do that then if the alternative meant going to jail or
Sure, but they have to...
$10 wrench attack, that old chestnut.
That's true, but how do they know how many of those private keys you have?
Yeah, well,
You can hand one over and keep the other 9. Right? So, I mean, it's too late for guys like us on stage, but like if, just don't tell anyone you have Bitcoin.
so you can plausibly deny that you own the Bitcoin is the answer.
Right. But it's there. It's still up to you. They can't force it, like they can't stop it. They can't confiscate it. They have to force you to give it up. And yeah. So those are that's what's new. Now the finite supply of Bitcoin, I mean, it's great that Satoshi chose that monetary policy, because imagine if he created Bitcoin with a 2% inflation. I still don't think, because of the first two properties, we would be stuck with 2% inflation. A dozen people would have created a shitcoin with a finite supply, and guess what? People wouldn't trust them.
Yeah.
Right? It would still be Bitcoin. So we're happy that happened. But I would rather approve inflation on top of Bitcoin than go with something like Litecoin. Because I don't believe the unconfiscatability and the decentralization and the censorship resistance in Litecoin or any other altcoin. Like, if you're gonna believe in Litecoin or any other altcoin, you should be screaming for Bitcoin to add inflation, because it's better. So a believer in an altcoin is a hypocrite, because he should be screaming for inflation on top of Bitcoin, because it would still retain the first two properties, because Bitcoin is actually decentralized, unlike any other alternative. And the reason why Bitcoin is decentralized is because you can't replicate the first 2 years of Bitcoin's existence. Find me a guy with $20 million of Bitcoin and of Litecoin in a landfill somewhere. Like, that's what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin.
Excellent. All right, well, let's throw it open to the floor. I'm sure some of you are chomping at the bit with questions. Yeah, sure. Harry will take the mic around to you. Who's got something they'd like to ask our panel? Craig.
Right, gentlemen. You're all Bitcoin boys, and all the people in here are Bitcoin boys and girls, right? Should stack stats, right? Stack sats, yeah? So, I'm a trader like you, Tone. You know as well as I do, and I'm a shit, right? Why do you see a negative effect of me trading shitcoins to build my Bitcoin stack? So, there's other tokens out there that are not as good. We know that. So why can't I take them long or short, depending on the platform, to build my Bitcoin stack? Why is that a negative when I can make more Bitcoin on the either euphoric positivity of a certain token or coin or whatever the bloody hell it is, or the negativity around that if it's offered on margin? Because for me, I build Zats too. I do the same thing, but I see vulnerabilities out there and I take advantage of it to build more Bitcoin. So why is it not a positive to work those shitcoins, as you call them so rightly, to not make more Bitcoin for us?
There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a positive or a negative. I have never had a problem with that. My problem has never been with traders. You can trade whatever you like. You can trade altcoins. You can, trade whatever. Trade penny stocks. Trade anything you like. Trade other currencies. There's nothing wrong with that. My problem is with people that have altcoins in their Twitter handles and altcoin logos trying to get people into hodl positions of shitcoins. Anyone that is upfront about trading, and I don't even care if you're doing it to get more Bitcoin. You could be doing it to get more Aussie dollars. You could be doing it, you know, you could be doing it to get more Ford stock, even though Tesla is probably the better option, right? Like it doesn't matter, right? If it's a trade, it's a trade. I want people, as long as they're honest about a trade, and also if you are a trader with popularity, and you are trying to trade the old coins to get more Bitcoin, but you are misleading people to make your trades better, well, you're lying to the general public how great Litecoin is just so you can get out at the top. I have a problem with that. So as long as you're honest and it's just a trade, please, I want everyone to make more money.
So a trade is a trade, it's fine, as long as you're not shilling some bullshit, it's fine with you, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Always was.
All right, anyone else? Up the back there.
I knew it Tone's answer, but it was a good answer. I just lobbed up, like, you know, wrap the part.
All right, so I have a question. My vision of what I think the future is going to be like, you'll be able to pay with Bitcoin your boat, your trips, your flights, you can buy whatever you want in Bitcoin without having that money exchange. And what I could imagine is that the hashing power, like the mining, will be very centralized across a few regions. For example, Russia, China, and US will have the biggest hashing power. And when it comes to the argument of being confiscatable or unconfiscatable, I could imagine a child pornography ring is exposed, and they know that certain addresses are linked to that enterprise, or whatever you call it, criminal enterprise. I could imagine that, let's say US and Russia turn around, say to the miners, if you validate those addresses and continue validating them, we will shut you down. So suddenly, the longest chain will not validate that anymore. And anyone that does that, if they want to become the longest chain, you need a lot of hashing power, they're not going to be validated anymore. So it's kind of the unconfiscatable side of it might not disappear. For most people, it still will be, but there's cases where it could almost be confiscated. What would you guys think about that in a case like this?
Yeah, so look, it's a good question. I think on the whole, overall, we're going to see more and more mining decentralization over time. I think that's the first point. So it'll be harder and harder for the government to do that kind of thing, to like go to a specific miner and say, I want you to not validate that. I think the other point I would make is also that over time we are going to see improvements in privacy technology on Bitcoin. It won't necessarily be confidential transactions, but we may start seeing more use of CoinJoin and Lightning and so on to obfuscate the transactions, such that it won't be so easy to just say, oh, stop this address. Well, they will generate another address. They will use CoinJoin to obfuscate the trail, those kinds of answers. And I think the other point I want to make as well is that sometimes in like when you look at like the Senate hearings or whatever, and people answer this question, they try to almost kind of like wuss out to the government and say, oh yeah, but we'll have like chain analysis to catch the bad guys and so on. And I think that's a bad take. I think fundamentally we have to accept that Bitcoin is a neutral tool. It will be used by bad people. And if you're not okay with that, well, I'm sorry. Like, it's like, you know, you can use a knife to, you know, cut a steak, or you can use it to, like, hurt someone, right? So it's ultimately, we have to make our peace with that, and, you know, it's a neutral tool. So I think that's kind of the way you have to look at it, right? One saying I've heard by Taj Raja is, Bitcoin is the money of enemies. How would you take payment from someone even if you hated them? Well, Bitcoin is going to be that. And unfortunately, you know, you have to take the good with the bad, as kind of brutal as that sounds.
Or send it to Westpac and they'll do it for you.
So I just got a question back at you. How long down the line is this vision? 10 years, 20 years, or like next year?
No, I think 10 years. Like regulation takes time to begin, but I could imagine 10 years.
I'll take the toxic
End of the
cynic.
decade. Like,
I'll take the toxic cynic point of view. So if it's 10 to 15 years time.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say mention like.
Alright, if it's 10 to 15 years time, I reckon the Bitcoin price will maybe if like the full bullish stock to flow equation plays out, maybe 5 million a coin. Now I can tell you two things about government that you can take to the bank, and you can take it to the bank since the history of governments. One, they're incredibly stupid, and two, they're incredibly corrupt. And you can buy them with a bottle of wine. Trust me, when Bitcoin's 5 million each, the president and the legislators will be Bitcoiners. So don't worry about getting regulated out. Sad but true, but I think that's exactly how it's going to play out. With regards to centralization, mining will go where power is the cheapest. And you know, as more and more people set up cheaper and cheaper power around the world, mining will just go there. It's going to be very, very difficult to centralize mining.
So we truly centralized to
So you have a very specific hypothetical in a very uncertain world in the future. So I believe that over time mining will get more decentralized, not more centralized. That's my view. It's debatable. In your analogy, US and Russia would actually cooperate. Again,
it could be China and Russia, for example.
right.
I have no hair by them, mate.
China and Russia, I don't know, maybe. I still doubt it.
Russia is a gas station pretending to be a country. Don't worry about Russia.
Right. And also, assuming these countries actually really care about things like child pornography, like they...
Yeah, it was an example.
Right. Again, it's so many hypotheticals there. Now, again, having said that, on the other side of it, Bitcoin has so many checks and balances. Mining is not what makes Bitcoin decentralized. We proved it during the SegWit debates to get SegWit in. 90% of miners didn't want it, and guess what? We have SegWit. We basically told miners what to do. The users did, the nodes did. And if the miners were actually going to fight the nodes, the developers were going to be on the side of the nodes. The developers will always be on the side of the users, not on the side of the miners. And Luke Dash Jr. was going to get that, you know, they're like, you know what, if the miners don't do what the users want them to do, we'll just do a proof of work change and we'll make sure their $1 billion operation goes to a paperweight, right? So miners have one job, solve a math problem. They're not paid to think. They're paid to do, they're a hammer. If they don't like it, go do something else, right? And they are being paid to the tune of $18 million a day to be a hammer, right? So be a hammer and do what the users want you to do. So that mining centralization is not a concern for me at all. It would have been a concern if the blocks got bigger, because then you have centralization of everyone wants to mine on the same pool to have the advantage of finding the next block. So those aren't a concern. As long as we have, you know, 100,000 nodes around the world, Bitcoin will be fine.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Down here. Oh, yeah, Harry. You get it. Oh no, sorry, we got someone.
All right. Question for Tone. It's the Craig Wright question. So, as a fellow Australian, we would call him a bullshit artist. And you can kind of tell when a fellow Australian...
I think as an Australian, you'd call him something else.
No, that's reserved for good people, mate.
So, like, you get a feeling of he's lying. Everyone can tell that he's lying. And I know he was on your show. He seems to keep on doubling down on these lies. The lies get bigger and bigger. My question for you is, what's the end game for Craig? Does he end up in jail? Does he end up richer than he is already? Where does he end up?
I'm not sure how rich he is, to be honest with you. He clearly doesn't have the Bitcoin he claims to have. I mean, he has a very rich person in his corner, which is Calvin Ayre. So he might be rich via proxy of Calvin. And does he end up in jail? I'm not sure for what. I mean, claiming to be Satoshi, there's like 20 of these people now, right? That's not exactly a criminal offense. I mean, he's got that civil case in New York. The judge could have thrown him in jail for being an idiot in court and for lying to the judge. But if he doesn't go back to the US, that's not exactly a Julian Assange, you know, get a helicopter and ship you away situation. I don't think he's gonna end up in jail. He is doubling down on the lies and the crazy. People just have to start ignoring him some more. This is coming from a guy that had him on the show.
Yeah, he was on the show.
But I had him on the show for a very specific reason. I had a goal to make the Bcash fork as dysfunctional as humanly possible. And I think I achieved it. And that was the purpose for having him on the show. This is why I didn't ask him any Satoshi questions, because that wasn't relevant to me. Like, I had him on there to just make the split as dysfunctional as possible.
Did he reach out to you, or did you reach out to him?
I reached out. I believe I reached out to him because people were ignoring the Bcash split. And I wanted to turn it into a clown show, so I reached out to him to make that Bcash split a clown show.
Did you know that the Mt. Gox database that shows all of the buys and sells on Mt. Gox in 2013, if you go through that database, you can see Craig Wright's email address buying like 1 or 2 Bitcoin at $1,000.
That's probably all the money he had to buy Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised. I didn't see it. But I will add onto that the Bcash fork. In doing that, during the fork, I was rooting for him. I was on the side of BSV. I wanted Craig Wright to, he clearly, everything he said in my podcast with him about destroying Roger Vere's Bcash side clearly didn't work, right? It's funny how people think that Craig Wright and BSV could destroy Bitcoin when he couldn't even destroy Bitcoin Cash. And I was rooting for him to destroy Bitcoin Cash because Bitcoin Cash is a much bigger pain in the ass to deal with those people than the BSV and Craig Wright's people. It's obvious that side is he's a fake Satoshi. It would be so much easier if he actually destroyed Bitcoin Cash. There'd be 1 Bitcoin today. It would be so simple.
That's actually one of the things I loved about BSV. It's it's a reductio ad absurdum argument against non-consensus hard forks. So that's how silly it is. So we've got another question from Jack. Sorry, it's not on. Oh, that's okay. So James,
I'm wondering if you guys can help me with something that I think is an elephant in the room. So I get on a long enough timeline, we'll have enough miners and decentralization, and that'll increase. And I think also it's fair to say that right now, for a new entrant to come in and try and attack Bitcoin through a 51%, it's not feasible due to the capital costs. Something I keep going through in my head is we've got China with up to 65% of current mining power, as I understand. And I'm wondering, can they nationalise that?
Not even close.
Not even close?
Based on?
I think it's closer to 30. You can check out Chris Bendixson. What's is it?
CoinShares guy. Yeah.
CoinShares released like a quarterly report of like an in-depth market analysis based on megawatts of power sold, market-based interviews, all of that kind of stuff. So there's that indicator, and there's also the Cambridge Institute for Alternative Finance. They produce quarterly sort of state of cryptocurrency reports, which is a review of mining on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and one other one. So I trust those more than like CoinDesk or like CoinGeek, or the like RAG stuff. So like if you can't take Cambridge to the bank, I don't know who you can take to the bank.
Yeah, even if those numbers were true, which I don't believe that they are, I don't care if all mining is happening in one country. It still wouldn't concern me when it comes to Bitcoin. It just means that the other countries are stupid. It doesn't make Bitcoin centralized. It's the programming of the code and user nodes. That's what makes Bitcoin decentralized, not mining. And I do believe mining will decentralize over time.
It'll follow where the electricity is cheapest.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with Hass and Tone here, I think it's just about more and more people taking the financial sovereignty into their own hands, right? Like my perception is there's a lot of people out there who are just trusting Trezor and trusting Ledger, right? We need to get those people running their own node with their own hardware wallet and their own like proper setup. There's too many people just like trusting the exchange, no, it's like we're trying to teach people the right ethos and the right ethic of, don't trust, verify.
There's also a giant gap between trusting your coins on an exchange and trusting your coins to a Trezor without your own node. There's a,
That's it.
a big gap there.
Yeah. Admittedly.
There's a little bit smaller gap between running your hardware wallet to your own node versus running your hardware wallet to putting your coins with someone else. Well, everything has a degree though, but at the same time, we don't want people running nodes that don't know what they're doing really either, right? Like it's, if you're going to run a node, take the time and learn about it. We don't need everyone running a node because then what happens is you end up running a node where you think is a node, but it's more like a node that you bought from a company and then the company kind of updates stuff for you there. So that's also not good. There is a lot of education needs to be done. I think there is an infinite number of conferences that just sell you shit. We need more conferences that actually like teach you how to do this stuff. There wasn't one, so I kind of brought the idea to Adam back called Understanding Bitcoin to teach people how to set up a node. And hopefully this becomes something part of almost every conference. Let's have a front day or a back day and teach people how to actually set up a node.
Well, you'll be having that with Giacomo in Vegas.
Yeah, in Las Vegas for Unconfiscatable, one of those conferences where we just talk and explain stuff like the panel. But we're having a workshop, 2 days, teaching you how to use Bitcoin, how to set up nodes, how to use Lightning wallets, everything. This is the kind of stuff that people need to learn.
All right, so I have a couple of questions here. It's very quick. It's a double barrel question, right? It's a double barrel question. If someone's bringing exposure to our industry, all right, and they don't fit with your specific individual requirements of what you perceive to be truth, is that positive or negative? 1, 2, 3, yes or no? That's it. Don't have one more question after that, then I'm done. Tone, yes or no?
If that person is doing it for their, if they're doing it for their own personal gain, it's a no.
For the space, whether you're a Bitcoin maximalist or you like other things, like where's the line?
If they're creating Bitcoiners through shitcoin, I'm gonna say it's more bad than good.
Okay.
My take is we don't just want anybody. We're calling out to the remnant. We're calling out to the people. We want the right people. Right, so from my point of view, mass adoption right now is not the goal. What we want is people who are taking those steps to progress, right? Like you don't have to be perfect from day one, but you got to progress up the step. You got to progress up that ladder, right?
Okay.
Get a hardware wallet, run your own node, and like do it properly, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
And my view is we want. It's like I would rather have 1,000 true fans, kind of like 1,000 hardcore people, than like 100,000 kind of maybe I'm sort of into it and all whatever, right? That's my take.
Now, who are you working for? Who are you working for tonight? Is it Amber or is it Independent Reserve?
I was just filling in for
Which one are you working for tonight?
I don't work for.
No, I know, but I've been on panels here before, and I love you to death. You're a very smart individual, but you know,
I work for
the people that you work with have been absolutely negative, massively negative to very positive people in this space. And I've got nothing but love for you, man. I'm telling you, there are people you're involved with that are absolutely toxic, disgusting, absolutely hideous. I'd rather shit out my ass. And they won't be on stage with me for that purpose. Now, I don't care. I want the space to grow. Come on, my question is this. Are those people welcome in our space or not?
There is no space, only Bitcoin. That's my answer.
Next question.
Exactly, mate. Exactly.
Yes.
First of all, thank you guys for all the content you put out there. It's been very helpful for my Bitcoin journey, and I'm sure it has for other people here as well. My question is about national currencies.
Sorry?
National currencies. So do you see a scenario in, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years where we still have national currencies, but let's say they're pegged to Bitcoin? Or do you see just everybody using Bitcoin?
I don't see national currencies pegged to Bitcoin. I see national currencies being fully digital in the future alongside Bitcoin. And that would be good because if a nation knows that Bitcoin is there and their citizens could use it, they could provide certain things with their national currency to, for certain things. And the people in that nation may support it. And having Bitcoin in the background or alongside the national currency will probably keep those politicians more honest in how they manage their national currency. But I don't really see national currencies go away. And before I hand the mic off, I do want to mention to something that you said to the previous question. We're not, it's not, what we want doesn't matter, right? Like Bitcoin is a decentralized system. We can just provide our opinion, and you gave an opinion. Mass adoption right now is not the most important thing. And I actually agree with that because I can pose a question back to you guys. Would you have been, at the time, maybe not. In hindsight, going back, would you have preferred the internet adoption be delayed by 5 years, but have internet have full privacy? Like imagine if the internet was being built slower and built with full privacy. So you couldn't be censored using the internet. So you couldn't be spied using the internet, right? Would you give up 5 years of internet adoption? Let's say, the iPhone coming out 5 years later, right? In hindsight, we all would. So sometimes you gotta get the shit right from a code perspective, and mass adoption, when it comes, is great, but it needs to come on a proper underlying footing.
My take on that question is, I think there's different scenarios, right? So one scenario is like the Bitcoin stays in the shadows, and it's like if you listen to Stephan or you see some of his work, he talks about this as the monetary vigilante scenario, right? So it might just kind of stay in the shadows, it may never get huge, and it's just kind of used in like dark markets and whatever, grey markets, and it just kind of stays like that. But I think the most likely scenario is that it just keeps rising over time. It's like a Pac-Man, just kind of taking new groups and then they come into the fold. So my take is longer term that it'll be, central bank digital currency, whatever, and people who just believe in that. But then there'll be all the, citadels, as we say, right? There'll be all the people who just are transacting in a real free market, and they're just much more prosperous because they're holding Bitcoin and using Bitcoin.
I think you guys have covered it. Yeah.
Oh, though I am in Australia, so I think you guys are already 5 years behind internet rate. So that's a much year, so it's even 5 years for you as well.
All right, there was a question, I think, up the back there.
Yeah. So I really like the vision of national currencies being like kind of, let's call it cryptified. One question towards that, do you think such kind of like national cryptocurrencies would be programmable as well in the way that like people can, take Bitcoin script for example, so you can have like something more complex than just like a currency exchange on it?
The only thing that separates Bitcoin from a national currency today is mining. There's really nothing else there. There's encryption in fiat currencies now. 98% of the Australian dollar is digital, not physical. Give it another 10 years and there'll be no physical money in Australia, as I guess. The US dollar is the one that's going to be hardest to eliminate. Maybe not hardest, like countries that have poor digital infrastructure will be hardest to eliminate paper money. India is one of them, some other countries that rely on paper money. But as far as the developed world with good technology, the US dollar is the hardest, and that's because of the developing world using paper US dollars. That's why it's hard to eliminate it. But the only thing that separates Bitcoin from a government currency is mining. And no government currency will ever have decentralized mining. In fact, no other currency should have decentralized mining because it makes no sense. So they'll just have everything that Bitcoin has except for mining. And therefore, it's not going to be unconfiscatable, it's not going to be censorship-resistant value transfer, and it's not going to be finite. But all the other aspects of security and encryption, Bitcoin and that fiat currency are going to be identical.
But
my take on that is we're probably there's not really a reason why they wouldn't build in many of the same fintechy sort of stuff, right? It's just ultimately they would want the same kind of AML and sanctions and all that sort of stuff. So it'll be way more permissions. That's kind of the sure way I would think that.
Much easier to collect fees on every single transaction as well. So 100% will be going all digital. And negative interest rates as well. So your money is in there and it's stuck and it's going to be slugged a negative interest rate too. So yeah, if I was a government, I'd be racing to get my currency fully digital. Best way to line my pockets.
Well, fully digital as such is not helping anybody yet. It's just...
Oh, it's helping Bitcoiners. I'm also praying that governments would do that because the more currencies go digital, the more there is a need for Bitcoin.
We
got questions over here.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, we got a question
Is
there.
he okay?
Hi, gents. Thanks for coming out. Joy here from Morpheus Analytics, just a bit of a plug. We provide BI dashboards for cryptocurrency traders. So my question is, in terms of hackability, do you think, just a simple yes or no from each one of you, do you think Bitcoin is hackable?
Probably not. It's also not necessarily when you say hackable, which part of Bitcoin? Will someone exploit a bug in the Bitcoin code? I mean, it's highly unlikely, but even if it happens, people will just not accept those transactions. The users are the decentralized nodes choose what Bitcoin transactions to accept. So I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. So.
User accounts can be hacked.
So you're saying when you entrust it in a third party, such as wallets, that's when it is?
So definitely hackable. And yeah, wallets apparently can also forget passwords. So
I'm gonna be on Peter Schiff's side here. Blockchain. I said it on my podcast this morning. Blockchain.info or .com or whatever they're calling themselves is the worst wallet that does not hold your key. So if you take all the wallets that let you be a custodian, the one that I hate the most is that one. And it lost some of my coin back in 2014, and I'm not surprised it's still losing people's coins. It's just a terrible wallet. Peter Schiff chose poorly. That's all I can say.
Hello. This is my first Bitcoin meeting, and I had no idea that there was this many people in Australia that could spell Bitcoin. I really had, it's been a real pain.
We'll run a spelling test next, yeah.
Tone, I've been watching you being a star for quite some time.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you. And I saw your video at one day, and I thought I had to be here. It's not a problem.
Perfect.
Just a couple of things. My background is political economics and watching the slow, inevitable march to the collapse of the international central banking system. And my absolute obsession with Bitcoin now has turned out to be just this last year. Otherwise, I had no interest in it before, because of an extremely fundamental shift that's just hit me, which I'm afraid I haven't seen addressed at this meeting. Loved all the other stuff, except for when it comes to this. The fundamental thing that I'm most excited about as an unreconstructed lefty and maybe an anarcho-capitalist, I don't know what the words are, is this, that when the collapse happens, I expect the state to do what it has done since 1913 when it set up the Federal Reserve, and that is to ban private holding of gold. Understand this? So no wussing around saying, oh, we're going to go hand in hand, you know, with a pluralism of, you know, mutually acceptable currency bases and, you know, all these crypto national currencies. That to me is like la la land. This is going to be more in the priest's quarter, I'm afraid. There will be a crusade like you would never ever see in your fucking lives, because what's at stake here is an attack not on the citadel of Jerusalem, my dear friends. This is the very core of capitalism itself, and that is currency.
Preach!
Now, from this, sorry, it comes two questions. The first question is this: you cannot possibly assume that all of the digital currencies that are in the presence right now that are being formed. China is about to launch one, which I predicted 6 months ago, and I suspect the Federal Reserve in Russia with China, with Iran, is about to launch another. There is no way in the world that they are compatible with Bitcoin. And it is no accident that most of the Bitcoins are mined in, guess where? China and Russia. They are not paying for electricity. You're not getting this. It is free electricity. All of the aluminium smelters that are the most intensive users of electricity are actually now being used to do Bitcoin. Within the next year, I suspect we will see the first lampoonings of two things. The central banks will start accumulating Bitcoin because they will have no choice. That's the first thing. They will have no choice at all, and that will parallel all of the subterfugal backroom accumulation of gold that is happening as we speak, and it started in 1997, in actual fact, of China probably having something between 20 and 30,000 tons of gold in order to back these crypto. They're not cryptocurrencies. I want to stop this today. What these nations and what...
I'll comment on this. Yeah. So, no one really cares about the Chinese gold-backed currency or the Russian gold-backed currency. They can launch them tomorrow. They can launch them. They could have launched them yesterday. No one cares. Until you can send a plane full of rubles to Russia, and Putin sends you a smaller plane full of gold back, no one is going to trust them, right? It's not about whether your currency is backed by gold. It's about whether you are going to get the gold from that country, right? The reason why it worked back in the day with America is because when you requested your gold, America sent it to you, right? So basically, Americans would have to trust the Russian ruble backed by gold, in that if they turned the Russian ruble in to Russia, they would get the gold for it, and that's not going to happen. So, like, it may happen, but good luck. I'm not going to trust it. I'm Russian, and I don't trust it, right? That I'm actually going to get the gold. So, will central banks start buying Bitcoin? Maybe. I believe that they will. I think it's a little sooner than later, but even that, I give that maybe a 10-year. Like a 5 to 10 year time horizon. I don't think there's going to be another massive gold ban. No one has gold. Like don't raise your hand, but like how many of you here actually have gold? And I bet you maybe 5 hands would go up. Like I'm sorry, no one has it. So the government is not going to go out and ban gold. Now what they might do is, if they know some kind of a collapse is coming, and I don't see a global collapse. Like, the world doesn't all collapse. Like, some countries do well, not to mention everyone is incentivized not to have a collapse. Can they ban Bitcoin? Can the US and Europe get together and ban Bitcoin? Probably. That would actually be bad, because every single regulated institution that's involved in Bitcoin would now immediately have to sell it on the open market. That is going to crash the price. That is a concern. I mean, banning drugs didn't really do any good, so banning Bitcoin is not going to do any good. Figure with the age of technology, everything moves faster. The war on drugs lasted 40 years. The war on Bitcoin may last maybe 10 years at most. It'll be hard, but eventually Bitcoin will prevail. It's going to be tough. The thing that I guess you should worry about the most in that situation is the stock market. Government confiscation of people's stocks. Private, so that's a bit of a concern. But again, a lot of these politicians are very invested in the stock market. I used to read those gloom and doom blogs also. Thank God I stopped listening to that nonsense about 10 years ago. I've never been happier. Maybe the collapse will come, maybe it won't, maybe I'll die before it happens. It's not something I worry about, but I make sure I have Bitcoin in case it does.
Yeah, so great comments by Tone. My view is it's not really, I don't think of it like it's going to be a big collapse. I just think it's going to be a steady growing of this Bitcoin parallel system, and people can just opt into that system. And yes, it's possible there might be a war on Bitcoin and so on, but I think that would only be a short-term, a medium-term downer. Longer term, I don't think you can stop this thing. You look at the US, they're saying there's no capacity to kill Bitcoin. Right? I think it just, people are sort of recognizing and cottoning onto that. There'll be enough countries that Bitcoiners can go to. Once people once people here get rich in the next bull run or whatever, they'll probably go and get like a second citizenship and just, piss off to somewhere else that, has better tax treatment. So I just think it's too kind of one-sided. And the other point I would make also is I just don't see it like politicians and regulators, they want to get rich too. They think number go up, so they're going to get some Bitcoin for themselves, right? So I just think fundamentally, orange coin good, number go up. So
speaking of which, you had a question.
Yes. With regards to central banks, I think they're too arrogant to build a Bitcoin position. They're just they'll Peter Schiff it. They'll resist it until they're fired for resisting it.
There are other concerns, right? Like a lot of people that run these central banks, they're pretty smart people. I know a lot of us think that they're idiots, but they're not.
They're evil geniuses.
They're very smart people, and probably some of the smaller central banks, like, I don't know, like Barbados or something, they're going to be like, you know what, we're going to buy some Bitcoin. But the challenge is, how do they secure that Bitcoin, right? Like, someone has to have the key. Like some government lower paid employee, some guy that's doing tech support for the federal bank could be like, I can just take this Bitcoin. So, it's a challenge. I kind of think central banks buying into Bitcoin is a smart move, and even those smart people at those banks will think it's a smart move, but they should be smart enough to go, shit, how are we going to secure this Bitcoin?
Multi-sig, easy.
Next question.
Oh, yes, hello. I have a belief that the economic incentives for facilitating transactions in Bitcoin will move from the first layer to the second. Do the three of you have an opinion about whether that will actually happen? And
it's happening.
Yeah, I believe it's happening as well.
100%.
And do you think that that is a valid sort of proposition that the incentives will move to the second layer?
Yeah, look, I think if we're to see, Visa and MasterCard and Amex level transaction throughput, it'll have to be on the second layer, and I can see a future where the majority of on-chain transactions are simply channel open, channel close, and if I need to send somebody $20 million, and everything else layer 2, 3, and 4. So things won't stop just at layer 2. Sounds a bit crazy, but eventually, I think when I eventually have kids, my kids will never make a single on-chain transaction in their life.
Yeah, largely agree. I think right now it's just early, and it just has to get to that point where enough people hold Bitcoin and enough people want Bitcoin and take payment in it. So right now, there's not a huge amount of like day-to-day commerce done on Bitcoin compared to like the hodler kind of crew, but it'll just come naturally. And so it's kind of like we're building out this Lightning network, and we're kind of getting things ready for when we do need that when people want to do that day-to-day commerce?
Well, the first thing is propaganda aside, Lightning Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It's still Bitcoin transactions on Lightning Network, okay? And it's not that long from now when you'll be able to open Lightning channels within Lightning itself, right? So people think that you always have to use on-chain to open a Lightning channel. That soon will not be the case, from what I'm hearing. Like, we are talking about, I don't like to use the word infinite, but as close to infinite as you can get type of scaling. Like, just let the smart people work, and let them work. Don't have them half their time, explaining why, people are putting out this propaganda how Lightning is centralized. Lightning is not centralized. Lightning is going to be more private, and we are talking about almost infinite scaling. Like, it'll crush Visa and MasterCard. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Is it going to happen before mass adoption? Yes.
Well, I think Tim, you had a question? I'll grab it back off you. Oh, here we go. There's one coming. Should I? No.
You're good? You're good now?
Oh, it's been answered. Oh, here we go. Up the back. Comes off the back there. All right.
The rollout of 5G, what impact will that have on Bitcoin and its price? If any?
I think in Australia probably nothing, but I wrote an article about Bitcoin as a startup, and I believe in the 5th and 6th reward eras, so 8 to 10 years away, things like Tesla's Starlink, like their global internet satellite network, will really benefit Bitcoin, because that just opens up a brand new customer base or user base rather, of billions of people that had no access to internet previously and now have a new means of getting on the internet. Because block size is what it is, a megabyte, like we could be on dial-up and it'll be fine. No 5G required. So for us, probably not a huge tangible difference over what we already have, but things like global internet satellite constellations, 100% definitely good for Bitcoin, coupled with ever decreasing costs of hardware. So from your smartphones, dumb phones, nodes, and so on.
Yeah, just a quick point. I think I don't have much knowledge on 5G, but I just think at least over the short to medium term, I see it like most people will have a home node and they will remote into that, or like the more competent person, like having a router kind of thing, they'll set up the node for the family, and everyone will just kind of use their mobile phone and like run connected to that. So I think to the extent that that helps that, yeah, maybe. But I think ultimately it's all about how many people like see value in holding Bitcoin. That's my take.
5G comes with ridiculous speeds, so anything that makes it easier to download a full node is, of course, most benefit to Bitcoin. Propagation of the 1 megabyte block across the world through a 5G network, again, keeps mining decentralized. These are all good things. However, I really wish countries and companies would focus a little more on getting internet connectivity to parts that don't have it, than making faster connectivity to parts that have pretty damn decent connectivity. Because if you get dropped off somewhere in the desert, 100, 200 kilometers west of here, and your life's in danger, that's probably where you need internet the most, and I bet you it's not going to work.
There is blockstream satellite for Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, your Bitcoin transaction will work, right? You can send an SOS message with that, thanks to Bitcoin, because they're actually thinking about connectivity without the internet, right? Like half of America has no freaking internet service, right? You drive it on a highway and between cities and your internet barely works. Like, I really wish the world was more connected with basic internet than all this focus on 5G, but that's my personal opinion.
And I think that's what we'll see with like the Starlink constellation and equivalent. It's just because I'm saying Starlink, not because I'm a Tesla fanboy or anything, it's just because it's the one I know. But there's like 4 or 5 competitors. Starlink's already got something like 300 satellites up, and they'll have, I think, 4,000 up by 2027. So, you know, seems for 7 years is nothing. It's another 2 halvings away. Yeah, it'll open the door to billions, and as long as we stick to non-gigameg blocks and we stay where we are, you'll only need really the equivalent of dial-up.
All right, I think there was another question next to.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think. All right, otherwise,
Hello, this is probably more for Stephan and goes back right to the beginning of this talk, and I was just mulling it over in my head. Tone, you talked about how you thought if Bitcoin wasn't deflationary but had other properties that weren't maybe as it is right now, Bitcoin would still be the number one just because I guess it's got the history, it was the first mover in the space. I've been listening to some of Stephan's stuff more recently, and he's very big on the whole Austrian economics, and I'm a beginner, I'm not going to pretend I know about this stuff, but the whole saleability of goods and the hardest money, and it's always going to rise to the top. I would have thought if, say, Litecoin had a deflationary policy and Bitcoin didn't, for example, it would rise to the top and become. Are we at odds here, or am I thinking?
Yeah, I think I get what you're asking. I think from my perspective, yeah, there's a huge thing about being first, but I think there's also with Litecoin the obvious factor of Charlie Lee, right? It's just there's always pretty much every other altcoin or every altcoin has that kind of centralizing factor around it. So I guess we'll never know, right? I mean, my take on it is if Bitcoin had, let's say, perma 5% inflation, I think it never would have gotten as big as it is now. I think we would not be talking about it so much like it is now. Now that's not to kind of go against necessarily Tone's point about needing unconfiscatability and censorship resistance. It's like a combo. You need all of those things together. But my take is it wouldn't have been as exciting for me without the fixed supply. But hey, I could be wrong. Maybe people would just be like, hey, this is the new money. It's just going to have a set inflation every year, 2% or whatever. But I guess we just can't wind back the clock now and know. So we're here with what we've got.
Right, we'll take one more.
Bitcoin's conception was immaculate. So, praise Satoshi. What can I say other than that?
Yeah. Look, I'm just saying it would have been very, very debatable. I mean, that would have been a real divisive issue. The big block thing was insanity, right? But this would have been the real debate for a fork. And the question becomes, can you limit the supply? Let's say Satoshi wasn't an Austrian economist, right? Let's say Satoshi was, the Paul Krugman type or a Nouriel Roubini type that created Bitcoin as far as their economics is concerned. Would we be able to get a soft fork in to make that supply finite? Because I tell you what's not going to happen. A hard fork is not going to happen, right? There would not have been a hard fork to limit the supply. It doesn't have to be 21 million. Could have been 100 million. Could have been whatever. If it could have been done with a soft fork, that is something that probably would have gotten in, but not a hard fork. It really depends how the code was built. And it would have been a very divisive issue, but I would not have been using Litecoin. And also, keep in mind, it wouldn't just be Litecoin. There'd be a dozen others, right? Which one do you use? Where do you move your life savings? You're going to keep them on Bitcoin. So you would have had to get it in with the software. And that would have been a big debate.
One more question and then we'll probably wrap it up. We got through everybody's questions.
All right. Oh, no, there he goes. All right. Last one. Come on, Tim.
No. I was going to give you a technical one before, but now I'm going to go with the lowest common denominator question, which probably everyone wants to hear your thoughts on. So, just show of hands, who knows what the halving is?
All right.
Big, a lot of hands.
Okay, so a few that weren't. So basically in around start of May this year, there's an event that happens every 4 years, so the amount of Bitcoin produced on a daily basis halves. So supply halves. If the adoption remains the same, there's only one variable left in the mix, that's price. So essentially we're expecting price to go up. There's usually a lag in that happening. looking back at the last two halvings, the third one, gentlemen, over the next 2 years, what do you see the price rate? The question you didn't want.
2 years, so right now we're kicking off 2020, so we'll be kicking off 2022. So I think that, I think the road through this bear market is going to be tougher than most think. So I think 2 years from now, I think that's when we're finally going to be starting to break that 20,000 barrier and starting to go into the next wave up. While I expect the majority of this year to stay under 10,000, I expect the majority of next year, 2021, to stay under 20,000.
It's an interesting observation, and Plan B's model, and he's publicly said if the price doesn't at least touch 100,000 before the end of next year, the model breaks down. So that's he said that. So yeah, my take is, I think it's probably like towards the end of next year that we will see going towards the Plan B model. I'm a believer, but again, I'm not a like markets guy, so I just hold.
As a markets guy, and many economists in the room, or you think you are, including myself, I think I'm an economist, I've read enough. Every single model breaks down. That's what a model does, right? So I would 99% certainty, I expect Plan B's stock to flow model to break down. Because every model in history has always broken down. It's just the way it is. There's no perfect trading model, there's no perfect economic model. Every trading model breaks down. Those of you that watch me regularly and saw me with Willy Woo, I actually went back to that podcast that we did from Baku back in September when I asked him, what are the chances Bitcoin falls below 7,000? And he said, virtually zero because our trading models will break down. Well, every model breaks down. Yeah. They did well. I mean, they saw it coming close enough to the time. They profited from that fall, but they had to change their models. Every model breaks down.
So I agree, every model breaks down. The question is when, right? I think it breaks down later than that. So that's my take.
For me, it's about the auto DCAs. So effectively, there's only so much money that needs. So to let's say you want the price to be 100 grand next year, that's 90 million a day that needs to be absorbed. It is what it is. So 90 million, multiply that, 900 times 100 grand. Am I close? Yeah, there we go. We'll edit that out in post as well.
I'm not doing math on Livera anymore. Florida State's going to demand their math masters back.
Right, and that is a lot of money to be absorbed a day, but not when there's 50 or 100 million people putting in $9 a day or 90 cents a day. So it all depends on the evangelism. The more people you can convert into regular savers who are taking a moral stance of exiting the fiat system and putting aside a little bit of their paycheck consistently, the more number will go up. So be the future you want to be. But with that said, 70,000 at block 700,000.
There we go. Well, on that bombshell, I think we'll wrap it up. Well, that was a very quick an hour and... Well, I'm doing maths live on here now. An hour and 3/4. I think we went there. It went quickly. I think we got through all the questions. So please join me in thanking our panelists. We're looking at doing our next Bitcoin event. What did we say, Tim? We were thinking the 26th, I think. So we haven't locked that in yet, but keep your eye on bitcoinsydney.org. That'll link through to our Meetup page. And we'll get that event posted up hopefully in the next couple of days. But just pencil it in for the 26th. And we've got our Telegram group there as well, so jump in there, keep the conversation going. Tone just joined today. Obviously we're all in there. So yeah, thanks again for coming, guys. And thanks again to Independent Reserve for the beer vouchers. Hopefully we'll use those who answered questions will go and spend those.
If you're not auto DCAing on Independent Reserve yet, seriously look into it. It'll be it's playing life with cheat codes effectively. So look into doing that.
Oh yes, of course, the $10 referral code. Please, yeah, use the referral codes. This will be a bit of a trial for the effectiveness of sponsoring our meetup. So get your dog to sign up. If you actually, no, don't get your dog to sign up. He won't have 100 points of ID. But, get grandma to sign up if you're already signed up yourself. But anyway, that's the thing. Hopefully we can, if it's effective for their marketing department, we can get some more sponsorship of our events going forward. So thanks again for your attention tonight, guys. We're free to got the room for as long as we want. There's no limit here. It's a pub, so they want you to keep staying here and drinking. So let's chat after. Cheers.